Urchins live in the upper part of the dome. Colonies of tube worms live in the ceiling. Bert Wilshire dives for a living and documents his trips on videotape. Fresh from his expedition into Megadome, he describes the environment.
Calcified on the walls, some small sponges and overgrowth, but pretty smooth limestone with a few undercuts. So I think one of the guys earlier was talking about that it may have been dry at one time, and it looks like it might have filled up partially over time based on the way the walls were scalloped.
Also coming up after his voyage to Megadome is Al Barefoot. This is a 2-decade-long hobby for him. On land, he's in aluminum glasswork and construction.
It was good to see the system back in a pristine environment there. It was real nice inside. Yeah, I went a little deeper than I was sort of planning on, but it all worked out real well.
Barefoot coordinated the dive team that was first to enter another submerged cave, dubbed Diamond Rock. The seafloor here extends 180 feet down. 60 feet down the hole, Diamond Rock's 50-foot wide room is an hourglass shape. It appears to be accessible from at least 2 entrances, but so far divers have only confirmed 1. The explorers under the Gulf have found a dozen or so submerged features off west central Florida. They're also intrigued by the true blue holes, which sport such names as the Glory Hole, Awesome Sink, and the Amberjack Hole. Amberjack Hole is named for a fish. Amberjack are known to be ambassadors, welcoming divers to blue holes.
These holes are lined with living reefs all the way around them with coral, live coral. So there's lots of small invertebrates, fish biomass, small fish, lots of food source in that area for the bigger fish to come to. We always find amberjack in all of our blue holes. They'll circle a diver, completely just circle him and follow him around the whole dive.
Other fish also call the reef surrounding the mouths of these holes home.
One particular site called the Amberjack Hole seems to be a hangout for a whale shark at certain times of year. A number of the divers that have dove that site have encountered this whale shark, and he seems to be quite friendly, actually, quite gregarious. He likes to hang out with the divers. Last time I was out there, he stayed with us our entire dive, and he would swim up to us within touching distance. So it was actually quite a unique experience.
The Amberjack Hole opens up in the seafloor at 114 feet below the water's surface. The circular opening is about 80 feet in diameter. It expands to as wide as 400 feet at the bottom depth of 364 feet below sea level. The Green Banana Sink was first explored in 1993. Its opening is close to 140 feet across the Gulf floor. It drops to 405 feet. There are also blue holes further south. They include the Captiva Hole.
We have found the blue hole off Captiva has a lot of life in it.
Numerous cutbacks hide huge grouper, octopus, and reef tropicals. Snappers, spiny oysters, and encrusting coral surround the walls.
I shouldn't probably reveal this, but at 112 feet under the ledges, it's full of slipper lobster. And they're in all season long. You just check to see if they have eggs or not. But we've seen schools of tarpon in that hole, hammerhead sharks, large mutton snapper. It's a great fishing spot.
The Captiva Blue Hole is covered by 85 feet of seawater at the rim and bottoms out at deeper than 180 feet. It's 30 miles from shore. Naples Spring is 27 miles from the coast. It's surrounded by reef sponges. The opening in the bottom of the Gulf is at 70 feet. Maximum depth is around 224 feet. Jim Coulter has just emerged from Naples Spring.
Oh, it was really cool. Nice ledge, couple ledges that kind of taper down, then it goes to about 77, 78 feet and drops straight down another 10 feet and then cuts back underneath. And there's a thermocline, and it drops, temperature probably goes down to 50s. A lot of bivalves, flame scallops, turkey wings, and they're all up under the ledge and stuff. Wave your hand by them, they all snap shut. Sponges are kind of all around the rim also, a layer of encrusting sponges and some tiny little loggerheads.
Springs and blue holes with large openings allow currents to carry oxygenated water inside. Their ecology is normal, complete with fish and invertebrates. Caves and blue holes with smaller openings allow very little exchange of Gulf water, so inside they're dark, low in oxygen, and have a sulfur-based ecology. University of South Florida biology professor Dr. James Gary has a research grant from NASA to study the unique sulfur-based environment in what was Babe Ruth's favorite fishing hole, a near-shore sinkhole with only an 18-foot wide throat.
And I sold it to them as a analog of what might be going on in Europa, because it was a sulfidic environment, but it was easily accessible. You didn't have to get the Alvin or go on a spaceship to get to it. So it's only half a mile offshore, so it's easy.
Europa is one of Jupiter's moons.
They think it's got a small rock core and it's got a salty ocean covered by an ice cap over the whole planet, and they believe that there might be, and there's sulfur in it, and so they believe there could be a sulfide-based ecology going on in there. That's highly speculative.
Gary found a sulfuric-based ecology in his study site, which is known as Jewfish Sink.
We know from historical records that Jewfish Sink was once an offshore freshwater spring. So you can imagine it was in a shallow area of the Gulf, and there was a freshwater boil coming up from the sink to the surface. And actually the old Spanish explorers would know where these were, and they could bring their ships and just anchor right over a freshwater spring, lower buckets over the side, and bring up water. And we know that particular Jewfish spring ceased flowing in 1962 when there was a drought, and then combined with overuse of the aquifer, it never recovered.
When the fresh water stopped flowing, salt water took over, creating sulfate. Bacteria in the sink convert it to hydrogen sulfide, which depletes the oxygen.
It's a biological system, works completely without oxygen, and it generates a poisonous gas called hydrogen sulfide. And hydrogen sulfide permeates all the rock around the area, and we believe the sulfide percolates up through the rock, and then it removes all the oxygen from the sediment, and we think it's probably changed the ecology of that whole area over the past 30 years.
Sulfide poisons small animals in the sediment. Since those animals are no longer there to filter Gulf water, the nearshore ecology changes forever. But somehow the sink itself has adapted. It's fed by organic matter that falls in.
It's a completely alien environment when you're in there. It's completely dark. There's eerie bacterial mats hanging off the walls. No living large organisms are down there. They're all microbial. In fact, a lot of animals fall in there and die from lack of oxygen and poison from the hydrogen sulfide. So you see a lot of dead horseshoe crabs at the bottom. You see a lot of stingrays come in and they can't get out, so they'll swim right at the oxic-anoxic interface until they get exhausted, and they fall down into the anaerobic zone and die.
But not everything dies down here. Bacteria and tiny one-celled animals thrive, and Gary hopes to prove there are also microscopic metazoa living in the poisonous sink. He thinks he's found one living multi-celled animal in the space where there is no oxygen. Gary says no free-living anaerobic metazoan has ever been recorded.
Right now we're studying the biodiversity and the biocomplexity of the system. We're getting a lot of DNA signatures from all the different kinds of animals that live in Jewfish Sink. We also want to map how far out from Jewfish Sink the sulfide is found.
Gary says not all offshore springs have suffered the fate of Jewfish Sink. There's at least one remaining active freshwater offshore spring called Crystal Beach Spring. And the explorers under the Gulf know of another farther south, Hot Water Spring off Sanibel Island. It's not known if the water bubbling up is fresh, salty, or brackish.
We, again, at this point in time, still tend to take water very much for granted. And if we better understand the flow of water, where it comes from, where it's going, the connection between what's offshore, what's onshore, we can manage our resources better.
Water managers want to know if offshore sinks and springs might be an alternative water source for this rapidly growing region.
Well, there was a notion that there was a lot of fresh groundwater discharging offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, and the idea was that it was just going to waste. So if we could possibly capture some of that water and bring it onshore, it may be used as either an irrigation source supply or possibly even a drinking water supply.
But so far, DeWitt says there's no evidence to support the premise.
In fact, we've found relatively few actual springs that are discharging water of any quality. And there has to be hundreds of these sinkhole features out there in the Gulf of Mexico. Many of them have been discovered. There's probably still very many that haven't been found yet. Some of them are probably buried and they're filled in with sediment. We'd like to continue to look at these features to have a better understanding of the geologic processes in the state and also any effects that on our groundwater resources.
The water entering the Gulf through sinks and springs today does not seem to be potable. In fact, some of it might even be polluted. The U.S. Geological Survey has done a number of studies that document underground links. One involved a field where treated wastewater was being sprayed for irrigation. Several sinkholes opened up in the field. A nearby spring increased flow within the week.
Everything that was in that spray field was moved directly to the coast within 2 weeks. So, you know, if there had been a large toxic waste spill or some sort of undesirable constituent in that water, then it would have ended up at a spring in a coast. And everyone believes that springs are pure, crystal clear water. And I think what we're seeing now in terms of water quality trends, you know, they're increasing nutrients. They're pathways for everything that we put on land to get into our drinking water and then offshore into our offshore systems.
Geologic history